Hello and welcome to a new episode of the BIMvoice podcast. My name is Petru Conduraru and today's guest is the design technology leader and senior associate at DLR Group. He's also adjunct professor at the Washington University in St. Louis for the School of Engineering and Applied Science. He's a LinkedIn Learning content author as well. I'm so glad to have you here. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let's start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
I'll throw in two. We missed one. So I'm also part of our R&D studio at DLR Group too. So there's leadership for design technology, and then there's how we research on technology things that we can use for design. So that expands it even further. So I kind of get into everything. My background's architectural. I started out going to school for a bachelor's of architecture at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. And then went out to San Diego for grad school. I worked for 10 years or so in different design firms, different retail, healthcare, military facilities. I've done a lot of different projects and worked in a bunch of different places. But I started using Revit in like 2004, and so I always was kind of first to technology, first using things, and was always asked, how do I do this? How do I do that? How should I do this sort of thing? And so you end up doing your project and then also helping people. And so eventually you start doing like 50 hours of work on your projects and 20 hours helping people, and it's not real sustainable. So I ended up just kind of getting pushed into a technology leadership role, which I've never really looked back. At the time, it was hard. Like, do I want to stop designing and just start working with things? And I've been able to just expand what I do, find new challenges constantly. And then as a person, I like to learn and teach. So everything I kind of do works together. So like the stuff at Washington University, I teach digital construction technology. So it's literally just, hey, what's out there? What can we use to design and build buildings, and then teach students about it, what it means, what the impact is. So it all just kind of works together, and it's just a giant blob of, I don't know where one thing starts and the other one ends. And like even the R&D component, we spend half the time trying to figure out what is the everyday of design technology, and then what is research of it, and where are we going new. And so it's fun. I'm never bored.
Yeah, that sounds like lots of fun. Uh, it's your team of R&D big? Like, do DLR have
So
a big research group?
it's interesting. There's a lot of R&D adjacent people. So the way it works is we have three R&D leaders. And so we have three different perspectives between our team. It's myself and Prem and Bonnie, and we work together pretty well, kind of bouncing ideas and keeping each other in check because we all have very different perspectives. But then each one of our market sectors across the firm, they all have things that they want to research. And so we're almost like project managers for certain research projects that the sectors decide they want to do. Me, because I've designed technology, that has component of research requests that some of those projects I'm actually involved in. So we're doing one where we're trying to write a series of scripts to automate construction documents. So the idea is like, do as much work as you can in design development, get all of your questions answered through the owner and the client and the end users, and develop your model to a level. And then how many buttons can you push to just spit out your documents, or how far can you take that? And so we're doing a lot of work scripting there, and we've gone pretty far with it. So that's one of those projects that I actually have to work in, where other ones, like we're doing this programming tool for a K-12 group, something like that, I'm more of championing and helping getting them research and working within it, and less of doing the actual work. There's just a ton of different people from each sector that are doing research, and amazing research. And then we even expand out to work with universities and partnerships there. So it's hard to say what the number is, because it's more of like, what year is it and how many different projects do we have and how many people are we sucking into that, that massive R&D.
Yeah, I see. What is some of the bleeding edge technology that you managed to use it to get some results with?
That's a really good question. And it's everywhere, and it's one of those things. So I moved from St. Louis to go to DLR Group because of some of the opportunity that was there. And there's so much from what we're working on, and we have some really, really knowledgeable experts. Shono D is one of our HPD, so high performance design group, and basically they're the ones that like help us get to net zero on buildings. And so they do all sorts of things, but she's a sensor expert. And almost want to like tell her to be sensor Shona because she knows more about sensors. So like anything that's tracking CO2 motion, she knows more about that than any person I've ever met. And so she's actually working with some universities, and they're doing like machine learning on the results of CO2 to see if you can predict out if there's people in room, how many people are in room, just by seeing the CO2 that's in the air. So a lot of like our building automation systems have sensors in there. So can you track from that sensor? Do you have to put an individual sensor in the room? What's that right blend of sensors that you need to make a digital twin that actually works? Because I'm seeing so many things with digital twins where it's just here's the flat, this is what you do, but it's all around what you need to get out of it and what level of information you need, and the right blend of sensors will get that for you. So we've got people doing stuff like that. Myself, I've got a couple machine learning projects set up next year to help us predict out, like what types of spaces you'll need, what types of things you'll need in spaces based on historical data. A lot of stuff with Dynamo, a lot of stuff with Rhino and Grasshopper. We have a reality capture department that they're really trying to push as much as they can do. So a lot of firms are in that transition between tripod scanning to mobile scanning, and we've kind of stayed right on that leading or bleeding edge with it. We've been looking at the Naviz scanner recently, and then we have a GeoSlam scanner, we have a LiDAR scanner, and using those to best capture as fast as we can and the best quality that we can on whatever project we need. So I mean, you name it, you can go into it. You go design viz, we have people using Unreal, Unity, Twin Motion, and it's a playground.
That sounds really exciting. It's so nice to have such a work environment where you have all these visionaries, because not everybody is using all these tools and not everybody tries to invest so much in the future actually. And I don't know, is this standard in the US? Like most of the companies have an R&D department?
No, it definitely isn't. And I mean, DLR Group has been doing a lot of investment in the right areas, especially when it comes to technology. What I love, like I'll present the things that we're doing, and I'll get grilled on it by our executive leadership, which to me, that's rare. Like normally you go and talk about tech and you just get somebody staring at you like, that's neat. Like, yeah, great. And then here it's like, well, how do you plan to implement that? What's the return? How are you tracking that? What do you do? How many hours is this going to take? And you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like you get to go through and actually vet it. And like I have those plans, it's actually there, I think it through, but then to actually have a conversation and get critiqued on portions of it means that they care and understand. And even when they don't understand, they'll take the time to go and research it or ask you more questions and keep going. So that's like the biggest thing you can ask for. And as far as like the industry goes, that's one of our biggest problems in the industry is we're very hourly based. So all of our contracts, it's that individual project, it's on to the next project. Even we struggle a little bit getting like our firm will actually fund these projects and we can't get people to work on them because they have so many other projects they have to do. So like that's a big challenge, is not only are you willing to invest, but are you willing to put up the people that do the work? And it's usually your best people because it's somebody that's really interested in learning and doing. And so that's something that we have to figure out. But most firms don't invest in the R&D component of it. And not that they have to invest a ton. And I actually think that a lot of firms, especially like smaller ones, pulling together and putting like one person to work with several firms may let them be able to expand their footprint and do other things. So I think we're at a point where we need to, before software kind of takes over a lot of what we can do on design and construction.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, this is like you say, it's not needed to finance or make a complete department of R&D, right? You just need one or two people there, like to have someone to see what is happening around, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned about the sensors and to make these predictions for the CO2 emissions. What is this actually? How do you capture the data? Do you get that data just like behind the 3D model? Do you have a 3D model here? Do we talk about a digital twin or
It
just
depends.
pure data?
Yeah, I mean it's one of the, like I almost get mad at digital twins as a term because it's just kind of grown into this thing. And it's really, what do you need? So you can create the data that you would need to make decisions with just the data sets. You don't necessarily need the 3D model for it. The 3D model is more of if you're running like simulation on something and you want to see how something new is going to work. If you want to see when something's going to fail. Because otherwise, if it's just to be able to spot what your issues are. So let's say you've got a whole bunch of mechanical equipment above the ceiling that's failing. You really just need to know where it is and where to go look for it. And so you may only need a floor plan that's colorized by assets. You can put that together in a web page. You can put that together in Power BI even if you wanted to. But if you wanted to have something with place and use augmented reality where you can walk around the field with iPads and look at it, then you need the 3D model to have the geometry that you can toggle whether things are on or off. So it's really about what you need. But as far as like tracking, like even I'm gonna unplug and show. Hopefully the numbers aren't too bad today. Yeah, so I've got at my desk a Kytera monitor, and this tracks data over time, and you can see it shows what's in there. And then we have software and data people in our Chicago office that are actually looking at that data, and they're going out to the website. They're doing an API call and pulling in the data, and then they're putting together. They're using SkySpark to do it, but they're putting together alerts based on the information that's in there. So we're doing this as kind of like a side project because we're all stuck work from home to kind of show, what are these values like in your home office versus at your regular office. And we're finding that the air quality at the regular office is dramatically better than your house. We're seeing like you can actually tell when each of us are cooking because you see like a spike up in VOCs. It's just really cool. Like you can learn a ton by watching. And then the question is like, what can you do with this? What does it matter? And to me, I've got this mantra of like same data, different lens. So I mentioned like all the different blend of sensors. You can put all these sensors together and that's the data set. Each person in an organization cares about that differently. So you can, like the facilities manager cares about which spaces need maintaining, or your real estate manager needs to know which spaces are being used and how they're being used and how they need to be changed. So you can take that same information and change it for however you want to do it. A lot of firms are talking about like just right now seeing which spaces need to be cleaned. So if you can tell where people were, again, the real estate person cares, are these rooms being used or not? But the maintenance crew cares which rooms actually need to be cleaned and which rooms really need to be cleaned. Or, if you're going into COVID and you're looking for which rooms had more people or too many people, then you need to send your security person down to actually, tell people to move away or to do something different. So to me, it's collect all this information and how you present it back in what form is what really matters.
Yeah, and how can we you make that easy to read and use? Because we are talking about specialists here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like experts using this, but how can we make this usable for asset owners, for example? Are many asset owners interested in this kind of stuff? Do they think so far?
I think a lot of people are interested in it, and a lot of people see the cost of doing it, or they'll buy into a system that does too much, and then they don't actually do anything with it, or it's just dashboards of information. Because you kind of mentioned you can present it to, like, Power BI is a great example. You can put that on top of data, but it's still just kind of organizing it in a way that it's readings. And unless you're an engineer or trained professional, you can't look at those readings and know what it means. Like, sure, 88 CO2, like, what does that mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. Even if it's red or green, it's like, well, how red is this? Like, am I going to die? Am I like it? You need to be able to translate that. And so there's data, which is just the raw data. When you translate it into vision, it's information that you can read, but you still have to infer from it. So it's that next step of like, do you take this and do you email somebody and say, hey, do this? Do you colorize something red? Do you create a list of things that are failing? It's that part that to me is the important part that most of the stuff is missing. And we're getting into it quite a bit with some of our clients is like, how do you translate all this data and help? And that's kind of the fun, exciting part of it.
Yes.
Like, it's how do you make the building that you design better? How do you prove that the building you design actually is doing what it's supposed to be doing? And then if you talk to our energy group, they're taking it and it's really more of like, how do you optimize this building to make sure that it stays as a net zero building? Like, you did all this work to design a building that's supposed to consume no energy. Well, that only works if you keep these things maintaining and working the way they're designed, and things fail. So without tracking it, you don't really know, and you're not actually doing what you set out to do. And so you can put all these monitors on all of the devices in the building and actually understand what you're consuming.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a future Star Trek movie. I don't know if it's happening, if there are buildings where people do this, but it's definitely something that we should aim for. Sounds like ideal.
It's a growing trend, and it's why digital twins gets talked about so much, because to me, like, that's where that's going. Um, it's just a lot of people aren't able to do that, and they aren't able to really like take the data and translate it into the needs. They can present the data all day long, but they can't actually turn it into something that you need to do things about and make it actionable. And so it's one of those things, like, it's growing. I think you're seeing a lot of buzz, and you have to sift through that and figure out what is somebody actually doing something and what somebody tagging digital twins onto just a laser scan. Like, you have to take it and do more than just show that piece of information. And I think 5G getting pushed out is going to make a difference on that. I'm a little concerned with COVID that it may take a step back if we're not going back into office spaces. That could be a challenge. But then you also have the flip side of it is, we're big on like reset certification, which is indoor air quality, and you're seeing a lot of workplaces having to show that their workplace is safe for their employees, and show that, hey, these spots are good, the air changes over and it clears out these rooms and they're good. And we're finding through reset we're able to do that pretty well. So there are some that are pushing to it. So it's kind of the a bit of a step back in some areas, and then others seem to be leaping forward with it, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. We are on the right track, definitely.
Can only hope.
Yeah.
We're always on the track we're on.
Yeah. And even if COVID might set us back, at the same time, it sped up many things. We were forced to improve our ways of working, right?
Mm-hmm.
We must see the positive from this as well. Of course, there is enough negative, no doubt about that. But it also had some. It pushed us, like it took us out of our comfort zone, and maybe this will help us in with BIM and everything,
Mm-hmm.
adopting technology and digitalization quicker.
Well, it's definitely challenging how you design. Um, a lot of people don't have that studio space to lay out and draw a sketch, build a model. Even the traditional building with a 3D model. So you build it and it's just in your office. How are you sharing that with the team? How are you sharing that with the client in a meaningful way? And if it's holding a model up here and twisting it around, well, then why not have that virtual in 3D, and why not just work there? And so it's definitely challenging how we traditionally would have designed in the past.
Yeah. Let's make a segue back to university. If I may ask,
Yeah.
what kind of technologies are you teaching there? Do you teach mostly for design or also for construction or and management as well?
So it's actually through the construction management program. Most of my students are dual majors. They have the construction management, and then they also have an architectural major. And Washington University is a pretty good university in the United States, and most of the students are just smart as can be. Like, it's really cool. But the class is digital construction technology, and it's kind of BIM, VDC, and IPD. So the idea is BIM is the thing. So like BIM being this 3D model, and then VDC is the activities around it, the virtual design and construction. So like, are you using for design, are you using virtual design visualization or energy analysis? All these things are capable because of data and 3D model. Or are you using it for fabrication or building ownership on the? And so we look at design, construction, and building ownership based around BIM, so the activities you can do, and then IPD being the pie in the sky world contract structure where nobody sues each other, and we're not worried about data sharing or anything. It's just, this stuff's here, we can do all these things, how far can we take it? And so we try to just talk about what's out there and what it means. last year we got sucked way too into AI and automation and what that means to our industry, and like ended up talking about like the the driverless job site, and like we looked at construction design and ownership and identified all the things that could be automated out by AI, and that was a really fun conversation. Then we got into like 3D printing of buildings and how that would change, even on a design level. So let's say we're 3D printing a building, and not looking at today where it's doing just kind of extrusions, but let's say that we can actually do additive design of structure, and we're able to do this generative design structure that's across there. What does that do to like our wood industry? Like the 2x4, is that a thing? Like nominal wood dimensions, if you're not using them for building, what's the existence of that if you just have a printer on the site? So like we kind of get into that sort of conversation. It's fun. It's 3 hours on every Thursday night, and we just talk. Like I'll show a couple videos, or I'll do a presentation, and then we talk about what it means. I'll have students present on it. It's just a ton of fun for me.
Yeah, sounds very exciting. You just dropped a bucket of acronyms there. Let's start dissecting them a little bit. I just don't want to scare the audience
BIM,
with this.
BDC, and IPD.
Yeah, let's start with BIM. What is BIM for you? How do you define BIM?
It's a 3D representation of a database. And so it's the blending of a model with a database behind it, and established relationships within that geometry based on the data of the database.
What is the meaning, and what do we have in the database?
All of the information about the building. So it's a database. Have you ever seen one exported?
One exported what? IFC model?
The database of a Revit model?
No.
So you can actually just export the entire database and look at it. Yeah. And it's one of those things that like, once you start looking at that, I feel like BIM just makes sense. The entire thing is broken up with tables. And so like going all the way back of like, what's a database? It's just a collection of spreadsheets that are related in some way. And so the spreadsheets, or they're called tables, are each category of things inside of Revit. So like Revit, there's visibility categories of casework, walls, structural columns, structural floors. And so there's a table for the type and a table for the instance. And the type is that class of object. And it would be like, if it's casework, what type of casework is this? Is it a base cabinet? Is it an upper cabinet? What's the size of it? Does it have shelves? What's it made out of? Who's the manufacturer? And what's the cost? And then if it's the instance, then you're talking about like, where in the building is that cabinet at, and how many of these are here? And those are stored separately in the database. And it does that for every single category inside of Revit. And so all of this information can be pushed and pulled. And as you move the geometry in Revit, the database is updating the information about these things.
How is this database meant to be used, and by whom? Like, are we talking just about the database that the designer is making and delivering to the contractor who is building the building?
Good question. It depends who's using it for what and when. Because like we're talking about digital twins, like that same database transfers into that same. It's about transferring of data. The database is a schema of a way to store information about a building, and so that's why it is building information modeling. And usually it's not great for site stuff. It's not great outside of multiple buildings, and you have to start adding in information to collect it all together. And that's totally doable, but it becomes about like transferring information from one spot to the other. And so the software programs that seem to do it best are the ones that are relating to it. And so they figure out like what's the unique identifier of the thing inside of Revit. And so there's information the designer cares about. Let them deal with that stuff. They care about the look, the feel, the size, the requirements. The contractor cares about how to install that thing. They have a whole different set of requirements around whatever object you're looking at than the designer does. And then the owner cares how to maintain it. And so you don't have to store it all in the same database, but you do have to transfer it from one to the other as needed. And I think that's probably one of the things that we're really getting into now as an industry. And like Assemble does it really well. They can search a model and pair outside data. So you can do a lot of cost estimating real time based on the design model without having to like maintain a separate model. It's more just associating data to assets.
Yeah. But isn't this a little bit inefficient? Couldn't we find a way to make it easier? Like I see right now, like what is happening here in Norway. A designer is making the 3D model, is designing the building, right? And after that, the builder is making his own 3D model, how to assemble, how to put that out, right? Couldn't we find a way to be more effective in this process? Couldn't we involve, maybe if we involve both parts working from the start, and like contractor saying what I need for you to be aware when you design this, wouldn't be more efficient? So we cut the cost as well of the building, right? If we find a way to make it from the start feasible for them to build it.
So that kind of goes, so when I said IPD, that's a contract structure for a project. And so it's an integrated design process. And so the owner, the contractor, and the design team all go into an agreement together, and they work together. You don't see it that often. Normally, the process is design, bid, build, where architect designs, it goes out, it gets bid on the street, and then contractor wins the job, and they work for the owner and they build the building. And that goes into the, I'm paid to do this much work, and I'm only going to do this much work because this is my fee and my portion. And so what you're describing is like, can it be better? And like, you have to get around the contracts to get into that, because why is the design team going to spend twice the money? Because to maintain what needs to be built, we can take a duct, for example. Duct has a certain set length of each piece, and or like a pipe, there's set lengths that they have, they assemble them together, and there's a kit of parts where the designer cares, I need to connect this thing to that thing and have these requirements around it. So they're modeling within that idea, and they're just doing a straight line, and the phase that they're working in, they're gathering requirements and they're making adjustments on the fly. So if you're worried about how you're building it, and you're doing it and you're building it within these individual segments, to make a small change is a massive challenge. You have to figure out all this extra stuff. So that's where like IPD, it's like, okay, we're all working together, or a vertically integrated firm's another term for it. And that's where the owner, the contractor, and the designer is one entity. They're all one thing. And so like we work, and Katera are two big ones that are kind of dissolving, but they're ones that we've talked about as this vertically integrated firm doing all of the work. And that idea is that yes, you can make it better, you can streamline it, but you have to be working together for that. And we're not set up that way right now.
So the IPD type of contracts are not very popular right now.
It's hard when you can basically say, hey, you can't sue the contractor if they build something totally wrong to the owner. So, or it tends to be where they start in doing it, and then they come up with a hybrid model where they kind of, maybe the design and the construction team are working together, but they're separate from the owner. And so like you get most of the way there, but that you're not going into the ownership portion of it, where you're transferring the data over to them. There's tons of diagrams on that where it's like, oh, the designer knows this much, and then they hand over the drawings to the contractor, and they have to relearn from the beginning because they don't know what the designer knew. Then they know the very most at the end of construction, and they hand it over to the owner and walk away, and the owner has to learn everything about the building after that they had no idea. And so like keeping them together, making sure that there is value from it, it's not there everywhere it can be.
Can we do something to push this forward to become more mainstream?
There's a lot of people trying to do things for it. There's Alex Belkoffer with McCarthy is somebody that I know who actively talks about how McCarthy is trying to change the way design firms work. A lot of it benefits the construction process, and there's changes that they know that the design teams can make that can really affect them. And so they're talking to owners on like, hey, if we're working together, we can do these things. And so, there are people looking to help and to do things, but I also see a lot where it's like making giant schemas and data structures that don't work for what the needs of the building owner are. It's like if you look at BIM execution plans and LOD, they're very blanket statement across the whole building. You don't need LOD by category, you need it by area. Like you need more definition, you need more data, you need more model around certain things in certain areas of the building than you do everywhere. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's how are you going to use this stuff after the fact drives all the decisions of how the designer can help, how the contractor can help, and how everybody can work together. So I think it's more of taking it project by project than just saying, "Oh, we're going to fix this problem."
Yeah. And I cannot stop about thinking about what you said, that they do sometimes this kind of hybrid, where the contractor and the designer work better, but the transfer to the owner is not happening. Who are we kidding here? The maintenance and the use of the building. What is the percent? It's 90% of the time, right? How big segment in the life cycle of a building or of a project is the building, the design and the building phase? It's
Hmm.
10, maybe 15, or maximum 20%, right? And
Yeah.
it's actually there where we need more to increase
Yep.
the level of knowledge and how to use this, because that is the missing chain in the whole link, right, of in the supply chain.
Well, and there's people like me and many others, the design technologists out there love BIM and all these other things. And most owners don't have people that like they don't have a team of people that work in Revit. So they're not going to update this 3D model in the future. So you hand them this model that's meant to be a digital twin and do all these things, and they're not going to update and maintain it. So then it just becomes it's useless after they change the building. And so like if they have to go in and do replacement of some several pieces of equipment, well, now all of a sudden the power loads, the requirements in these spaces, that's off from what that model is. So unless you're maintaining it, it doesn't do a thing for you. So I think that's part of the problem too.
I don't know. Can we maybe maybe it's too complicated. Like what I see right now, they don't have enough uh, knowledge and people that know stuff, right? Like you also said. Uh, I don't know. It's either they need to invest and have people that understand better how things are working, right? Or we must find a simpler way to deliver something simpler. But this takes time, of course. You need more time to make a better and simpler, more complex
It's
project,
probably
right?
both, and some may not need it. Like if you look at industry, um, it's gonna vary by the type of building. A healthcare facility has to maintain a lot of stuff, and they really benefit from this. They can use the data to help them immediately in their jobs. I don't know, a store or something that they're just going to let sit there until they knock it down and renovate it in a certain couple of years, or like if it's a fit out project in a mall, something like that, they're gonna change it over so frequently. The model after the fact may not matter. They care more about just the square footage of that space to look at their overall retail footprint. So I like the angle that DLR Group has, in that we're a firm that is trying to impact the world as far as the sustainability of the world through energy, and we are pushing on net zero buildings. And to me, you do need this level after the fact to keep a net zero building. If your goal is to reduce our planet's carbon footprint, you need to actually do that, and you need to be able to make sure that you can do it, prove you can do it. There's another thing out there too, where when we're talking about contracts, there's a lot of talk of get paid for your value, get paid for what you're doing, and not do the hourly work. And you'll hear design firms talk about, should we just go into a contract and say, hey, we can save your building this much energy, and we'll take 2% of the savings. Like those are things that people do. Um, but how do you actually prove that you can do that? And then if there's something that the owner did, like if it's high stakes money and you actually care, then you're going to care how the building's used, and you need to be able to prove, okay, well, we designed it based on your building being used 8 to 5, and then you ended up changing the use of this building, and you had people in there 24/7, and it's drawing more energy than we designed it to. So like those are things that have to be worked out in order for that model to actually work.
Yeah.
I know that's a side topic, but
Yeah, indeed. Are there any? thinking clients that are more driven and that have more people competent in this? Do you have around the US some clients that see the future like DLR is doing for designing?
We do. We're working with some. I'm not going to say any names because I'm not
No,
off
it's
the top of
fine.
my head sure who we can talk about. We do. They're there. There are glimmers of hope that give me a lot of joy in my job.
That's really good to hear. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, and so that's a nod to all of them if if they listen.
Yeah, awesome. What is VDC?
Virtual design and construction. So BIM as a term came out, building information modeling, and construction started getting into BIM. Everybody had BIM departments. BIM was really marketed everywhere. And then a lot of construction companies started saying, well, we do more than just BIM. We're doing all of these things. So clash detection, we're doing estimating, and it's virtual. So how do we use digital tools to design and construct a building? And so that's where kind of BDC arose from. It works in and around BIM. So I've always kind of pitched BIM as a thing, as this actual noun. BIM is the building information model. Virtual design and construction are the activities that you can do around it to virtually design and construct a building.
I
And
see.
so that could be, a mechanical contractor taking a design BIM and pulling out the data of it to build their fabrication model and then actually fabricating those elements from that. Or if we're doing augmented reality on the job site, we're doing an overlay looking at it. Well, that's not BIM, but you're leveraging BIM to do something to help yourself with something on the job site.
That is a good explanation.
Good.
If we go back a little bit to IPDs,
Mm-hmm.
are there any states in the United States that are more willing or they push the legislation in any way? Can this be a factor in this? Can this be helped by politics?
I'm not aware of any states that are doing anything. I don't think that you could, because basically you're taking legal rights away, and that's what the like why that contract structure is challenging is that people there's reason to want those legal rights. Those are there to protect yourself, and taking those away, it could put you in a bad spot, and to force people to do that, that probably would never work. And I could be totally wrong 5 years from now, but it's I think it's why that method just hasn't really blossomed. Because when you see presentations on it, on why this should be the way, the savings there, the process there, we all agree that there's a problem in that I make this BIM for my design side and the contractor can't use it and they throw it away and the owner can't use it. Um, that that's agreed. Like there's not many people that aren't going to argue that, or not that aren't just going to say that, yeah, that does seem like a bad process, but there's reasons for it. A lot of it's around like our AIA contracts for how we design. So like so much of it is written to protect the architect because they're providing design intent. They're not giving directions on how to build the model or how to build the building. They're giving you the criteria for what the building should do and how it should function. And so then the contractor is supposed to come in and take that the step further and figure out how to build that and make it work. The designer has to provide a building that can be built, and that we can get into that conversation someday. That doesn't always happen, but you do try to. And that's where like you do clash detection in different ways if you're a designer than you do if you're a contractor, because you're looking for things that won't work, but you're not doing every single thing because you're not building the building. You're giving them these construction documents that aren't the 3D model. The 3D model was a tool to help you create the construction documents. Personally, I'd love to get rid of construction documents and let that model be something you can hand over. But then you get into like a review process where you have to go to a local, like whatever town or city or state you're building in, you have to go to their plan jurisdiction and show them the drawings, and they have to approve of this building being built. You have to do that on a number of different levels depending on where it is. But those people require the drawings. So if we didn't have that, or we had people that could actually review a 3D model And how do you go about doing that? Like, how do you have them review that, we're requiring a set distance off of a toilet because that's what ADA says you should do. Or we're requiring this dimension off of a door because that's a clear space for somebody to stand. That stuff isn't shown in a 3D model. And those are questions that that reviewer will ask and say, hey, the building code says you need to have these things, but they can't really see that unless they're called out in a plan in a way that they're used to reading. So that's one of those things that we have to work through. For myself, I do try to help in that. I actually just talked to a friend of mine who's Ryan Roberts out of the St. Louis area. He's a fire marshal there. And he had reached out to me a few years ago while I was at BSA Life Structures to help them with Bluebeam just to do digital review. And then we ended up doing a workshop to help the fire marshals in Missouri and Illinois start using Bluebeam. And the idea was to just get away from paper as a starting point. And like, how do you take measurements on a plan? How do you take measurements of these spaces? How do you read the information? Because if you can get those groups doing it virtually, then it's a step towards BIM, because then you can say, okay, you're already on the computer, you're already doing this. Well, here's this other platform that has the same format that you can look at these, but then also you can just look at data. And then you can look at like what Upcodes is trying to do. Are you familiar with them? Upcodes?
Upcodes?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. They're and no
like
they're
Eurocodes?
kind of a startup.
It's like
No,
Eurocodes?
Upcodes is a company. They're out of Silicon Valley, and they're actually really interesting to follow. They were being sued by the ICC, which is an organization that controls the building codes in the United States. Basically, they had built a database that connected to all the local jurisdictions and national laws of what the building codes were. And so then they were charging people to have access to it. So the ICC said that they can't charge people for access to this public data, but they were presenting it in a different way. And they said, you can't, sue us for using something that's a law. You can't have restriction on it. They actually won the lawsuit. It's been really interesting to follow. But what they've been trying to do is AI for building codes. And so you can put a BIM into their platform and it'll run checks. And they're still building, but they're one of the groups that I watch. So like they'll put a generic box by all the doors that meet these different like requirements to allow somebody in a wheelchair or a blind person to navigate through a building, or like overhead space downstairs, and automatically see if you have geometry that hits those requirements. And then they come back and say, hey, you need to fix these things. And so you see something like that, and if you compare that to somebody that has to review a 3D model, they can set up the checks for their local jurisdiction, run it through, and like that's where I could see it going.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Who said you won this dispute? It was the company, the startup, or the
startup one?
Oh, that's good. That's good then.
Yeah.
Why should be if it's public? Yeah, this is something like you eliminate here every complexity factor. Like you just have the guy reading the drawings right now, just writing there, do this test for me, and you get the answer.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And basically you have a team that's like taking books, because the building code's published in text format. Yeah. It's not in a database format. So you can't search it, you can't pair to it. So they're taking this, and there's time required to do that. And they're putting it into a database that's very easily searchable and able to connect to whatever you need to. So there's work on their part. So to me, it makes sense that you should be paid for it. So if the ICC doesn't want them to be paid for it, maybe they should do it themselves, or there should be somebody that stands up and donates and does that. But otherwise, somebody has to pay to have that there, and there's value for having it.
Yeah, this sounds like a huge jump in jumping over many obstacles. Like if something like this goes mainstream.
Yeah, I've been watching it for a while because it's been really interesting for me, and just seeing how the case was laid out. And it was awesome to see, because I've actually talked to both the people from Upcodes, and they're fantastic people, and they're trying to do something good based around a problem that we're aware of. Like it takes a lot of time to search a document for building codes. You also have to remember and know where the code is, and that adds time, it adds length that really isn't that much value to the owner in the end of it. Like the building should function, it should be safe, they shouldn't pay somebody to have to go and spend 2 hours reviewing this information if they don't have to.
Exactly. And not only that, like we as human, when we read documents, we sometimes we used to make some errors, and
Mhm.
machines don't do that.
Well, they can if
Yeah,
you program it wrong. And
yeah, of course. But I mean, when you test them and they are working properly, then you get much higher
yeah,
quality, right?
well, and there's always the argument of, well, you won't know if you automate things, or you won't know this stuff. And like building codes is a great example. It changes by state, it changes by city. Like they're allowed to make modifications to it, and it's whichever is more strict. So then you're expecting everybody to memorize all these books all over the place. And if you're reading through each one of these, it's 95% the same with a few tweaks here and there. And so you're gonna either confuse them, you're gonna make assumptions, you're gonna miss. And so if you're relying on your knowledge versus having something presented to you, like, hey, you're doing that in Texas, and Texas does things a little bit differently than Illinois does. And so like those, you don't have to know all of that. You still understand how the code works, how to design around it, but you don't have to memorize every single thing. It's like math class. You don't memorize every single formula. You learn how to use them, and then you learn where to go look for
Exactly. Yeah, I'm thrilled about it. I hope they manage to grow and do something regarding this.
them. Yeah. On the computer, never making mistakes. We use Teams internally to communicate. And our BIM group was messaging, and somebody came across a model that had thousands of warnings. And in Revit, if anybody's listening that doesn't know, each warning is listed in a list. And so every time you select something in Revit, it scans a list of warnings to see if any of those are associated with this thing that I'm clicking on. More warnings means slower model. So when I did a lot of stuff with automation for interior design, and like if you place a wall tile, we would join the wall tile to the built wall. And if you're thinking of like why they would be different, is like the architect puts a wall and they're responsible for saying that this wall is built with a stud and chipboard on either side. And then the interior designer comes in and says that, we want this finish attached to this wall. It's different than the construction, so you're not detailing it separate. But then to coordinate the wall openings where the door is a pain. So I'll join one wall to the other. What I did is I scripted that. And so we placed all the walls in the building for the interiors finish, and then we joined them. And I had my like lacing is term for like if you're doing one thing to all or one to one. I basically joined each wall to every wall in the model, and I created a list of warnings of like, I don't know, it was like 100,000 different warnings in their model. And so it just crippled the team. So that's one of those, like, the computer can make problems if you program it wrong. So that's a lesson learned that I always give, is check to make sure that what you did works, because you may be thinking you're saving time for somebody and really you made the entire team really slow.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Like I said, that needs to be checked, and
Yeah.
you cannot start. You cannot trust from the start, right? But if it
And you learn by making mistakes.
that's why we have different third part controls, right? On the projects.
Hmm.
So this can be done as well in the start. But yeah, that would speed up a lot, and yeah, would complete the entire supply chain. Like lift the entire process.
Hmm.
How do you feel BIM is adopted across United States?
That is a hard, vague question.
Are
Adopted
you
as
happy?
in,
Are you happy with how do you see this at different levels? Like if you think about companies, different designers, different contractors, different asset owners, are most of them trying to digitalize and using modern tools, or most of them are still behind?
most are. Most are definitely trying and using things. When it comes to BIM, it's funny because it's a 20-year-old platform. Like Revit's 20 years old, and we still have less people in every firm that are BIM experts and Revit user experts and don't know all the commands that are there. Don't leverage it to its fullest extent. So to me, it's just the fact that it's probably too hard. Like we're talking about like training for each year, like what training topics do we have to have? And we got into this conversation about, oh, we need to train people on how to open the files, how to print, how to make levels, how to make structural grids. And I'm like, that's the easiest, most basic thing that you need. And then it's like, well, people still make that mistake and we need to do it. And it's like, okay, if people can't draw the level and it's too difficult, then we've made it too hard. We haven't done it right if it takes training every single year on how to just say that the first floor is at 100 feet. Like that is a problem in BIM, not firms trying to leverage it and push it. So for me, the automation's fun in that we're kind of at this point where, we have people coming in that have programming skills and understand things. You have people that really have learned the back end of a program and can make it do whatever they want. And when you put those together, if you think of a good workflow, you can actually make it that people don't have to ever create that level and do the things that we think people should know how to do in BIM that really don't add that much value. Like at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is design a building that is fantastic. Like we want to make a building that changes people's lives. We want to make a building that functions really well. Like we're trying to design something to provide to be built, and all the other stuff is good and necessary, but not what we're like. It's a byproduct of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. What are you teaching on LinkedIn?
So I've got some courses, like a lot of it's around using Revit for presentation styles. So I've got a design or what is it, Revit for visualization, where it's a lot of the visibility settings and things of Revit. And it's not for rendering, but it's how you can use Revit as a presentation tool to convey design. And then there's like presenting design options. There's a lot of stuff on Dynamo. And then right now I'm working on one that's proving ROI on technology. And so this one's kind of fun. It's unique for me in that it's not picks and clicks how to do something, but it's, hey, we're implementing this new thing. How are we going to prove that the value's there? How are we going to track the value of something and then actually show our executive leadership that what we've invested in was worth it?
When are you going to publish this course?
Well, normally I fly out to Carpinteria, California and record. And with COVID, that's not happening. So I have no idea. We were supposed to do it in August. So it's kind of sit and wait and see. But my guess would be if it gets deep into winter, that we'll probably just record it here and send it out. But I'm hoping to go out there. That's like one of my favorite places to go. It's right on the beach in California. And it's really a beautiful spot to spend a week if you can.
Yeah, I see. But nonetheless, sounds like a very, very exciting course. So don't wait so long. Just record it at home.
Yeah, we'll see.
You can take a trip for the beach after COVID. We don't know when that will stop. So yeah.
Yeah, it'll be next year or 2 years from now. Who knows? Or never.
Yeah. Regarding BIM adoption and BIM knowledge and such, what do you know about outside United States? How do you feel is going with the BIM adoption across the globe outside the United States?
That's a hard one to ask because the people that I talk to are usually wildly interested in this stuff. So my perspective, like my LinkedIn feed is full of AI people, and like every time I scan something, there's just more amazing, and I keep connecting to people that I find interesting. So to me, my perspective of things is starting to get really skewed, and I probably need to dial that back a bit. But I do know that US, when I look at some other people, when I talk to other people, it sounds like we're generally further ahead with a lot of things BIM-wise that we're using. But then I look at a lot of people in Australia that I've been talking to, and they're really getting into AI. There's the Bad Monkeys group. They're doing some amazing things as far as pushing what we can do because of the data that's there. So I don't totally know. I know that there's a shift coming when it comes to BIM. I know we're kind of on that cusp, but like the platform's mature, people have mastered it. I was actually thinking about, like I mentioned, that automation or automating construction documents project. the effort that we're putting into programming where a dimension goes is like, then I look at what AI can do with photo recognition and predict out where that dimension goes. And it's a lot faster and it's a lot easier. So it's like, how much is this going to disrupt where we are? And I think the firms that are really dabbling into that and kind of seeing the value of what you can get out of it and structuring their data in a way that they can put it in to get that value, I think that that's going to let them ramp up so quickly that it's going to really disrupt BIM as the current state.
So you think AI, it's happening, and is going to have a big impact in our industry?
It's happening. I don't hear many people like in roles like myself that are talking about it in a very tangible way. It's more of like AI is going to come in and do these things. And it's more of like, well, you also, culture just eats technology adoption. Like you can come in with a great idea. It could be wonderful, but you also have to change the culture of a whole firm to adopt that technology. And AI is one of those things, like there's the fear of the computer replacing people. So the path of how you weave that in is really important. You have to have it small tasks that can save somebody, improve time and do things. I'm starting to kind of look at like how we circuit electrical devices. So if you think of like outlets in a room, there you can wire them together and there's a set amount of load that you can put on each circuit in a panel box. And then you need to do that in a way that it works for the facilities manager to go in all these rooms, shut things off and work. And so there's some nuances in that makes it a little difficult to just program, hey, maximum of 16 and then closest walk and put these things together. If you did AI, all you have to do is give it the list of location of each of those devices around the room, which circuit it's on, which panel it's on, and let it learn from, say, 10 projects. And then you have a trained model that can automatically predict out what these things should be. And then you just accept it. So like something like that is just, it's easier to learn from our past and what we do and how we work because it watches and learns like a person. But if you're just going with, I want AI to design the building, okay, somebody's going to revolt against that and not use it. So it's like, how do you integrate it in a way that it gets adopted, but where you can also leverage the power that's there?
Yeah, but like I still think it's a little bit or more unclear how this can happen for the leadership of companies, because let's be honest, if leadership of companies see the value there, they don't think so much. Not many of them don't think too much about the employees, right? If they see a way that, yeah, we can take this software and we can design 10 buildings instead of one in a year, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard as they can do that, and we don't jump into that. So like, there's definitely something not there. And architecture is a practice. Like people go into architecture, they're not going into business to make money. They're going into architecture because they enjoy architecture or
Yeah.
engineering. Or like there's a difference there in how people are wired for it, because you're not wired to just go and make business. If executive leadership was a business person and it was how do we make the most profit for this company, you'd probably ditch architecture and start selling paper or what. Like you'd shift to something else because it's more profitable. Like we do this because we love it. We do this because we can make an impact and we can do things that we truly care about. And the money's kind of a broad byproduct. Like you do great design, you do great work, and then you hope you still have a stable company. It's kind of like one of the approaches that you see people take. So I think that has a part of it. There's also with AI, it doesn't give you the same results. So like if you run the same, like, predict out if this is a hammer versus this being a shoe, it's not going to be the same every time because it runs through inferences and it learns as it goes. So people can pick at it and look at how it's not reliable because you don't know why it came to that decision. And that I think is a challenge for it. So it's kind of how you leverage tools, how you create tools that it's woven into to save yourself time and improve yourself, and really to analyze a lot of data that we have in a tangible way that you can use it.
Yeah. No, I don't think we are going to be replaced so soon. I think there is enough room for like I think what is going to happen, we will get AI working more for us, and we will like we need to graduate to retrain ourselves or learn new skills to work together with AI. we definitely going to
Mhm.
have a role there. We are far ahead, I think. Like until we are going to just click a button and get the entire building and everything else.
Brian Myers put a post out on LinkedIn talking about the Boston Dynamics robot dog that's on the site and walking around. And in his post, he had mentioned that you know we have a rover on Mars that can drill, and it can drill a hole with precision where they want it. And then you see this dog on the job site walking around scanning. Well, how long till that dog can have a drill that drills through the concrete slab for a pipe to go through? I bet it's going to make less errors, and I bet it's going to do it in the exact right spot. And then you're talking about money. And so if you look at COVID, and let's say that there's a mandate that nobody be on a job site and a construction company can't make money, well, that's that tipping point. Like that's what you're kind of looking out for. It's like, what is the balance of cost of money for automation and AI versus keeping people doing it? And then if there's something that removes people and you have to still make profit, then you jump into these things. So there's me, I'm kind of sitting here watching like how much is COVID going to shift the construction site? Because if people can't be there, I know for us, we're like really pushing on reality capture because we can't send people to the site. So we're going to go capture it. And then we're going to go let our teams review and do punch lists from remote because they can still act as if they're there. So I think that there may be things that get ramped up because of this too. Like you're talking about that, it pushes innovation. So
How someone can reach to you if they want to contact with you?
yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. I connect. I don't think I've ever declined a connection. So if you say, unless it looks like a totally fake connection, which that's happening more. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat. And yeah, that's the best way.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time being here. And I'm looking forward to see your course.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Don't take too long to record it.
We'll find out. Yeah, no guarantees. All right.
Sure.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye bye.